The day Ada had been waiting for finally arrived. The sun rose with a radiant glow over Abuja, casting a warm light on the bustling city streets. Ada, now 9 months pregnant, could feel the nervous excitement bubbling within her. She was both scared and thrilled, knowing she would soon meet her baby. Her belly had grown so large that it slowed her steps, and every small movement brought with it a mix of discomfort and joy. Obinna had arranged for her to give birth in a private clinic, but Chika had insisted they handle it within the family's home, reassuring Ada that it would be a traditional and a safe experience. As Ada moved around the house that morning, her mother fussed over her with an unusual tenderness that left Ada pleasantly surprised. Chika made Ada a special meal, a porridge dish from her childhood, while Nnamdi cleaned the spare room they planned to use as a makeshift delivery area. The preparations felt oddly intense, almost too meticulous. Obinna tried to be around as much as possible, but his work commitments as a cab driver made it difficult to always be by Ada's side. Even so, he had a nagging feeling that something was wrong. In his gut, he couldn't shake the suspicion about Chika's overly solicitous behavior. Whenever he mentioned taking Ada to the clinic for a routine checkup, Chika quickly discouraged it, convincing Ada that home care was more convenient and less stressful. That evening, Obinna returned home earlier than usual, determined to be present for the birth. He walked in to find Chika and Nnamdi whispering urgently in the corner of the kitchen. They fell silent as he entered, quickly masking their expressions. It wasn't the first time Obinna had caught them acting strangely, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He confronted Chika, trying to disguise his suspicion with feigned curiosity, but she deflected with a warm smile, distracting Ada by suggesting a walk to help ease the baby's arrival. As the night settled over the city, Obinna's nerves were frayed. He decided he would be vigilant and stay close to Ada, especially through the night. Little did he know, this was the calm before a storm that would shatter Ada's entire reality. The next day, as Ada began to feel the early signs of labor, she was overcome with a wave of anticipation mixed with pain. Chika and Nnamdi assured her they had everything ready, though they didn't allow her to see any details of their arrangements. She wondered why her mother was so adamant about keeping the birth private, but in her vulnerable state, she chose to trust her. Late that night, Mrs. Bello arrived. She was a tall, stoic woman with an intimidating presence that seemed to fill the room. Ada had never met her before, and though Chika introduced her as an old friend who had come to help with the birth, Ada sensed something cold about her. Mrs. Bello exchanged a series of tense looks with Chika, who led her to a back room and shut the door. Obinna, still feeling uneasy, tried to follow, but Chika caught him just in time, saying it would be best if he allowed the women to handle it. She claimed that certain traditional practices required a woman's touch, hinting at customs that Obinna might not understand. Reluctantly, he agreed, but his discomfort only deepened as he observed the secrecy and haste in their movements. Hours later, as Ada's contractions intensified, Mrs. Bello began preparing medical equipment that seemed far too professional for an amateur midwife. The sight of syringes, scalpels, and surgical masks left Ada feeling terrified. But her labor pains quickly overpowered her anxiety, and she had no choice but to surrender to her mother's and Mrs. Bello's guidance. The labor progressed with intensity, and Ada's cries filled the apartment, echoing down the corridor. Obinna, who had taken his position just outside the room, felt helpless as he listened, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists. But Chika reassured him it was best for the child to be born in a calm, uninterrupted space. Though his instincts screamed otherwise, he allowed himself to be pushed away. Inside the room, as Ada's screams continued, Chika and Mrs. Bello exchanged a series of cold, calculating glances. Mrs. Bello's steady, unfeeling hands worked swiftly, ensuring each piece of equipment was placed for efficiency. This was more than a birth, it was a transaction, one that would provide Chika and Nnamdi with the freedom they so desperately craved. After hours of pain, Ada's baby finally entered the world with a loud, healthy cry. Exhausted yet ecstatic, Ada reached out her arms, eager to hold her newborn. But as she opened her eyes, she realized something was wrong. Mrs. Bello held the baby out of her reach, and Chika's face was filled not with joy, but with a look of grim satisfaction. "Please," Ada gasped, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Let me hold my baby." Mrs. Bello barely glanced in Ada's direction, placing the baby in a prepared bassinet. "Not yet, Ada," Chika said firmly, her voice colder than Ada had ever heard. "You need to rest. We'll bring the baby to you soon." Ada's heart sank as her mother left the room, taking her newborn with her. Exhausted, she tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't respond. Panic began to rise in her chest as she struggled to stay awake, unwilling to let her baby out of her sight. She tried to scream, to reach for the bassinet, but her vision blurred and the room spun. Within moments, darkness swallowed her whole. When Ada woke, it was early morning. Weak and disoriented, she found herself alone in the room, the bassinet empty. Her heart pounded as she realized her baby was gone. Desperate, she stumbled out of bed, nearly collapsing from the effort. She staggered down the hallway, calling out for her mother, for Obinna, for anyone who could tell her where her child was. The silence that met her cries only fueled her desperation. At that moment, Chika appeared in the hallway, her face a mixture of faint concern and impatience. Where is my baby?" Ada gasped. "We had to take the child to the hospital for some tests," Chika replied, averting her gaze. "Don't worry. They'll bring the baby back soon." Ada could see the lie in her mother's eyes, and terror gripped her heart. She tried to push past Chika, determined to find the truth, but her body was too weak to fight. Chika's cold grip tightened on her arm, steering her back to the bedroom. Ada's mind raced, her thoughts consumed by a dawning horror. Her mother had taken her child, and she was powerless to stop her. Obinna had been on edge since Ada's labor began. He tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong, but he could no longer bear the suffocating tension. Early that morning, after Chika's explanation about the baby's supposed hospital visit, he noticed the sudden absence of Mrs. Bello and the briefcase she had brought with her. Driven by instinct, he decided to search the apartment. He started in Chika and Nnamdi's room, knowing it was risky but driven by an overwhelming need for answers. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on an envelope tucked behind a stack of old newspapers. Inside, he found receipts, a check stub, and a bank transaction that showed a suspiciously large deposit. As he examined the papers, realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The money was payment for something, and the timing aligned disturbingly well with Ada's labor. His heart pounded as the pieces fell into place. In his mind, he saw Mrs. Bello's briefcase, her cold, detached demeanor, and the lack of any true care for Ada's well-being. He was horrified as the unthinkable became undeniable. They had sold Ada's baby. Furious, he stormed into the living room, where Chika and Nnamdi sat, unaware of his discovery. In a voice choked with rage, he demanded answers. They both tried to deny it, but Obinna's anger was a force of nature, and their lies crumbled under his relentless questioning. Chika, cornered and exhausted, finally broke. She confessed the entire scheme, her face twisted with resentment and justification. She spat out excuses about deaths, sacrifice, and survival, as if the act was a necessary evil. But Obinna heard none of it. His world shattered as he realized the depth of their betrayal. Without another word, he turned away from them and ran to Ada, who was still too weak to comprehend the full horror of what had happened. He held her close, his heart breaking as he whispered the devastating truth: their child was gone, stolen and sold by the very people they had trusted most.